Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel for a brand new mystery with Molly. If you are new around here, if you have never seen my face on your screen before, then hi, my name is Molly and I post true crime videos like this every single week. So if you think that that is something that you might want to stick around for, then please do subscribe and don't forget to switch on the little notification bell so that YouTube will let you know whenever I post a new video. This week we are going to be talking about a solved case from California when a family of three seemed to just suddenly disappear without a trace one day in October of 2011. The police were alerted and they began trying to establish what exactly had happened to this family. Had they chosen to just go missing, or had something more sinister occurred here? Well, it was following the discovery of a notebook in their home which contained some very alarming writings when the police started to realise that this family may have actually been the victims of foul play and that the perpetrator, or one of the perpetrators, was someone very close to home. But quickly before we get into the case, I would just like to say a massive thank you to HelloFresh for very kindly sponsoring this section of the video. Now, if you are a regular viewer of this channel, you will probably know that I have been a huge lover of HelloFresh for such a long time. They are a meal kit delivery service that makes cooking at home so much easier. Every single week they offer a huge variety of tasty recipes from different cuisines, and to suit different dietary preferences, you just head to their website, have a little look through their meal options, pick the meals that you would like that week, and then they will send you a box full of all of the ingredients that you will need and step-by-step instructions on how to make the dish. And the reason why HelloFresh just works so well for me and my family is because it is just so convenient. They literally save you so much time in the evenings because you don't have to make a trip to the supermarket. You're saving so much prep time because the ingredients that HelloFresh send you have already been pre-portioned. They'll send you just the right amount of ingredients that you will need for the amount of people that you are cooking for. And that of course also means that there is a lot less food waste. A little fun fact for you here, but HelloFresh customers actually waste 21% less food than those buying from supermarkets. And HelloFresh's plans are completely flexible. So say for example you usually have 4 HelloFresh meals delivered to your door each week, but there might be the occasional week where you don't think you'll require all 4 meals because maybe you'll be going out for dinner that week, or you just won't be home one evening. Well, with HelloFresh you can adjust your meal plans and change how many recipes you want each week. So again, there's less food waste and you're saving your money. Using HelloFresh over the last few years has just made cooking at home not only easier for me, but also so much more enjoyable because they just take the stress out of cooking. So I really could not recommend their service enough. I highly suggest you guys check them out, and you can do so via the link in my description box. And for those of you who also live in the UK, you can use the code Westbrook60 to receive 60% off of your first box and 25% off of your next 8 boxes. And you can also scan the QR code that is on the screen right now to receive this offer too. Once again, thank you very much to HelloFresh for sponsoring this video and supporting the channel. Thank you to all of you watching for showing your support to the sponsors on this channel. And now let's just get into the case. Just before we continue, please listen carefully to the following. This video is about a double murder and it involves heavy themes such as allegations of domestic abuse, sexual abuse and child abuse. Viewer discretion is advised. So for this week's case, we are going back nearly 12 years now to the fall of 2011 in Compton, which is a city located in the state of California in the US. And this is Cynthia Alvarez. She was a 15-year-old girl who lived in Compton with her family. Cynthia was one of 2 children. She had an older sister named Diana, and the sisters lived with their mother, Gloria Vialta, and also their mother's partner, Alvarez-Lara. Cynthia's biological father was actually deported back to Honduras when Cynthia was still very young, and following her mother's separation from him, Gloria met and she began a relationship with Jose, who was originally from Mexico. Eventually they moved into a house together with Gloria's daughter, and Jose became a stepfather to Diana and Cynthia. And Jose and Gloria seemed to be very happy with each other, and Jose really tried his best to provide for the family that he now had with her. The family weren't very well off, to be honest, so Jose worked a hell of a lot to bring in as much money as he could because his partner Gloria was unable to work, I believe. Well, she had been a stay-at-home mum for a number of years whilst Diana and Cynthia were still very young. She would stay at home and care for them. But by the time this case occurred, Gloria was dealing with a number of different health issues, which I imagine meant that she was unable to really get a job. So for starters, Gloria was partially blind. She had a lot of trouble with her eyesight. She also had diabetes and she struggled massively with even just walking on her own. At just 58 years old, she had to use a walking frame to help her get around. So she regularly had to attend doctor's appointments and hospital appointments and receive treatment for her health problems. And of course, in America, medical bills can be incredibly expensive. So her partner Jose worked quite a couple of jobs to pay for all these bills. He worked in construction and I think he would take on just odd jobs here and there. And he also worked for a party rental company in Compton. This company would have like items and objects available for people to hire if they were throwing a party, a kids party. So for example, they had tables and chairs for parties. They had bouncy castles. And Jose's job was to deliver these items to customers and then collect them once the party was over. He was basically the delivery driver for the company. So yeah, he worked long hours. He worked both in the week and on weekends, all so that he could provide for Gloria and his stepdaughters. By the time this case took place in October of 2011, Gloria's oldest daughter, Diana, had actually moved out. She was quite a bit older than Gloria's youngest, Cynthia. She was like 10 years older, and in 2010, she moved out with her partner as they planned on starting their own family. So now it was just Jose, Gloria, and 15-year-old Cynthia living in the home, and despite the fact that they would oftentimes struggle financially, apparently Jose and Gloria would still try their best to treat Cynthia as much as they could. Jose would take her shopping and she would be allowed to buy new clothes and makeup. They bought her an iPod Touch. Obviously iPods were huge back then. So yeah, even though they didn't have much, Jose and Gloria never wanted Cynthia to go without, it seems, and that included when it came to Cynthia's quinceañera. If you don't know what a quinceañera is, it's a huge thing within Latin American families. It's kind of like the equivalent of a girl's 16th birthday, her sweet 16, but for girls who are turning 15. A quinceañera is a celebration of a girl's 15th birthday, and it's supposed to represent her journey from childhood into adulthood, I believe. And in mid-2011, it was Cynthia's quinceañera, and Jose and Gloria had been saving for a long time to give their daughter a really special day. They saved money to get her a beautiful dress, and yeah, overall I think the quinceañera went well. I couldn't find any information online which suggested otherwise. And a couple of months after this, the family were going to throw another party. Well, Cynthia was going to throw a party. She had planned a Halloween party, which she was going to invite her friends from school to. She was going to have it at her home, her mother and stepfather's home, although she said that her parents wouldn't be attending. It was a no adults allowed party, and she was really looking forward to it. However, as it would turn out, this Halloween party would never actually happen, because in mid-October of 2011, Cynthia and her parents seemed to just suddenly disappear without a trace. It was Monday the 17th of October 2011 when Alvarez-Lara's boss from the party rental company, her name was Blanca, she became concerned about him because Jose worked for the company over the weekends, and the weekend just gone, he didn't show up for work at all. And he didn't contact Blanca to let her know that he wasn't going to be coming into work, which was very, very unlike Jose. He'd worked for Blanca for a number of years and he had never done that before. He'd never just not turned up for a shift without any kind of explanation. He'd always been a very reliable employee, and so Blanca was worried about him. And on the 17th of October, she decided to head to his home in Compton to check on him, check that he was okay. But when she knocked on his front door, she got no response. And oddly, she actually noticed that the front door was open. It wasn't locked, it was open slightly. And so she pushed the door so that it was fully open and she peered inside. outside and it didn't appear as though anyone was home. She couldn't hear or see anyone in the house, but she did immediately notice that the house itself was just an absolute state. It was very, very messy. There was clothing and objects and rubbish all over the living room floor. Food had just been left out. Apparently there was a pot with some soup in it that had just been left on the hob in the kitchen and it was rotting. It just looked very, very untidy and dirty, to be honest. Not how Jose and Gloria usually kept their home. So the house raised a lot of questions. Why had it just been left in this state? And why wasn't Jose and his partner Gloria and stepdaughter Cynthia inside of it? Where had this family gone? What had happened to Jose that meant that he didn't turn up for work? Well, obviously keen to find answers, Blanca decided to raise her concerns with the police. So police officers were dispatched to the home and they began looking around inside the property themselves. And of course they also noticed that the house was very cluttered. There was mess everywhere. Cupboard doors had been just left open, drawers had been left open, so it almost looked like the house had been ransacked. The police began to think, had a robbery occurred here, and that's why the house was so untidy. Perhaps burglars had come in and made all of this mess as they were searching through the home looking for items and objects of value that they could steal. That theory definitely seemed very possible when the police realised that a jewellery box in, I think, one of the bedrooms of the home was empty. Someone had come along and just emptied this jewellery box, so it really was looking like this was a robbery attempt that the police were dealing with. And then, as the police were looking around the kitchen, something on the floor immediately caught their attention. It was a mask, a Halloween mask of this like black skull. It was very, very creepy looking. But you know what? That wasn't the only Halloween thing that the police found. In the living room, there were a load of just like Halloween decorations up, which seemed a bit bizarre. The fact that the house was in such disarray and then there were just Halloween decorations. But meanwhile, as the searches of the house continued in an attempt to identify any possible witnesses to whatever may have happened to the missing family, the police spoke to the people who lived nearby, the neighbours. The neighbours were asked if they could recall when they had last seen the family, and the majority of them said, do you know, actually it's been a while since we last saw Jose and Gloria. Like they hadn't seen them in quite a few days, which they did think was odd, especially the fact that they hadn't seen Gloria. Obviously Jose was out of the house a lot working, but Gloria was basically always home because she didn't work, so they did think it was strange that they hadn't seen her. But one member of this family had been seen fairly recently by one of the neighbours, and that was 15-year-old Cynthia Alvarez. This neighbour told the police that I believe just a couple of days before this, they had seen Cynthia in the neighbourhood standing by the dumpster, and she was putting some items and bags into this dumpster. The neighbour started chatting with Cynthia. They actually asked if her mother and stepfather were okay because they hadn't seen either of them in a little while. And Cynthia responded saying, oh yeah, they're fine. She said that her mother Gloria was actually currently having eye surgery, and so her stepfather Jose was just with her in the hospital. And knowing that Gloria did have trouble with her eyesight, the neighbour didn't think anything of this. Although, as they continued chatting to Cynthia while she was putting her rubbish in the bin, they did happen to notice what it was, what the items were that she was actually putting into the dumpster. It looked like some clothing and also some photographs of her mum and also just of the rest of the family, I believe. And when the neighbour asked Cynthia why she was doing that, why she was chucking away family pictures, Cynthia responded by saying something along the lines of, oh, we're having a clear out of the house, so I'm just getting rid of some things. Now, understandably, when the police heard this account from this neighbour, they were confused and suspicious. They just thought it was so strange that Jose and Gloria had not been seen by neighbours in days, and then Cynthia is seen throwing away family photos. Because photos of your family are most people's prized possessions. You know, when you ask people, oh, if your house was on fire and you could only save one thing, what would it be? I feel like the majority of people tend to say family pictures, photo albums, because they are reminders of memories that can't be replaced. So the fact that Cynthia was seen just chucking her family photos into this dumpster like they meant nothing, that made alarm bells ring for the police. They weren't sure yet exactly what was going on here, exactly what had happened to Jose and Gloria, but now it was looking like their daughter, 15-year-old Cynthia Alvarez, may have been a person of interest in this investigation rather than a missing person herself. So to either prove or disprove Cynthia's story, the police began getting in contact with the local hospital and asking if they had any record of a Gloria Vialta being brought in for eye surgery, because obviously that's what Cynthia told the neighbour was happening. However, none of these hospitals had any record of this. Gloria hadn't been admitted for eye surgery, so Cynthia had lied, which Cynthia's older sister Diana confirmed. When the police spoke to Diana, she said that she didn't know anything about her mother having surgery. This was news to her, so of course this just made alarm bells ring even more. The police were obviously very keen to speak to Cynthia about all of this, so while some officers began trying to trace her, other officers were still searching through Jose and Gloria's home, looking for anything that might indicate where they had gone or what had happened to them. And as part of their search, there was one thing that they found that just completely changed the course of this investigation entirely. They found something which indicated that this may have been a homicide case that the police were dealing with rather than just a missing persons inquiry. The police found a notebook in the home. It was just on a mattress in the living room, and when they started skimming through this notebook and reading what had been written on each page, they were shocked. In this notebook, someone had written things like, quote, "I am too scared, I cannot do it." On another page, they'd written, "You do it." And then on another, they wrote, "What about if she was going to bed? Can you kill her? And do you think you can kill her in bed?" It seemed as though the person who had written these was communicating with someone else through writing on this notebook rather than speaking with them directly. And they were telling this person to commit murder, to kill her. So who was her? Is the her that this person was referring to Gloria Vialta, Cynthia's mother? Was it Cynthia that had written these notes ordering someone to murder her own mum? And if so, who was this person that she was telling to commit homicide? Well, it wasn't long before the police had an idea of who this other person might have been. You see, as they looked more into Cynthia and her life and they spoke to other family members, they learned that Cynthia actually had a boyfriend. His name was Giovanni Gallardo, and he was 16 years old, and I believe he and Cynthia met in school. According to sources, they both struggled with learning disabilities and they were in the same special education classes in school, and they seemed to bond over this and they became close. One article I read even stated that they kind of latched onto each other in a way, and eventually they became an item, they became a couple. Much to Cynthia's parents' dismay, when the police spoke to other family members, including Cynthia's older sister Diana, they were informed that Cynthia's mother Gloria and her stepfather Jose really did not like Giovanni, and they were not happy that their daughter was with him. Now, frustratingly, I actually couldn't find anywhere online a reason why her parents felt this way, why they disapproved of Giovanni so much. Maybe they just got a bad vibe from him when they met him or something, who knows? But whatever the reason, yeah, they were really not keen on him, and they made that clear to Cynthia. They made it clear that they did not want her to be with him. But of course, what often happens when you tell a teenager not to do something or not to be with someone, it just makes them want to be with that person even more. So Jose and Gloria telling Cynthia to stop seeing Giovanni would have just had the opposite effect. She would have just wanted to see him even more. And apparently she would just sneak out of the house to see him. So now the police had another person of interest in their investigation, and they were eager to find Giovanni Gallardo to find out if he knew anything about this case. They found out his address and officers were dispatched to his home. However, he wasn't there at the time, but his mother was, and so the police started speaking with her. And she told the police that the last time she had seen her son was the day before this, and he was with his girlfriend Cynthia. So clearly Cynthia wasn't a missing person. Well, she was. The police still had to find her, but clearly she was physically okay. She was alive. Whereas at this moment in time, the police weren't so sure that this would be the case with her parents, as they hadn't been seen or heard from by anyone in a number of days. I believe Giovanni's mother told the police that she didn't know where her son and his girlfriend were currently, but she assured the detectives that as soon as she heard from them, she would get in touch straight away. And that she did. Just the day following this, Giovanni's mum rang the police and said that Giovanni and Cynthia had just come back to the home, and she said that she would bring the couple to the police station immediately so that they could assist the police with their inquiries into locating Jose and Gloria. Now, when the young couple arrived at the station, the police of course put them into separate rooms so that they could interview Cynthia on her own and Giovanni on his own to see what each of them would say, whether they would have the same story. And I believe the police spoke to Cynthia first. This was the 19th of October, by the way, so just 2 days after the alarm was raised, after Jose's boss Blanca realised that he and Gloria were missing, and she contacted the police. So the detectives sat down with Cynthia and they just asked her what was going on, where were her parents, and Cynthia proceeded to tell them pretty much the exact same story that she had told one of the neighbours days earlier, that her mother was in the hospital having eye surgery and that her stepdad Jose was with her. However, of course, as we've already established, that was a lie. Gloria wasn't in the hospital. And so the police said to Cynthia, we know that's not true. We know that your mum isn't in the hospital because we've checked with all of the local hospitals and there's no record of her being there. And so Cynthia kind of said something along the lines of, oh, well, that's what my stepdad Jose told me. He was the one who told me that my mum was in the hospital. And he said that he didn't want anyone to visit her. Gloria didn't want her daughter Cynthia to come in and see her. So Cynthia said that she hadn't seen or spoken to her mum in a while. And she said that she did think it was weird. It was a bit strange, but I guess she didn't think too much into it, or at least that was until she claimed her stepdad Jose threatened her. Cynthia told the police that a couple of days after Jose told her that Gloria had gone into the hospital, he actually threatened her and her boyfriend Giovanni with a gun. She said that Jose pulled out a gun, he pointed it at her and Giovanni, and he ordered them to collect up the majority of Gloria's possessions, so like her clothes and her family photographs, and he told them to get rid of them, chuck them away. He didn't want them in the house anymore. He didn't say why he wanted these items gone, he just ordered them to do it. And so Cynthia said that they did because they were scared. They feared for their lives, and that is what the neighbour saw. That is why the neighbour saw her throwing her mother's belongings into the dumpster. And Cynthia said that it was following this when she started to think that maybe her mother wasn't in the hospital after all. Maybe Jose had lied about that because he'd actually done something to Gloria. He'd killed her and he wanted to get rid of her clothing and family photos because they acted as a reminder of his partner who was now dead because of him. And Cynthia said that that was the last time that she saw Jose. After he pulled the gun on her, she didn't see him after that. And I believe she said that that was on the 15th or 16th of October, so just a few days before the missing persons report was filed to the police. However, the police didn't really believe this story for 1 second. They didn't believe that Cynthia was telling the truth about this. They believed that she knew more and that she had more involvement in her mother and stepfather's disappearance than she was letting on, because of the notebook that had been found at the home, the notebook that someone had used to order someone else to commit murder. The police theorized that the person who wrote these notes was probably Cynthia, and so they showed them to her. They showed Cynthia the notebook in her interview, and they asked her if she could shed some light on what had been written in it. Did she know who had written these notes? Was it her? And she actually said, yeah. She admitted that that was her handwriting, that she had written these notes which seemed to instruct someone to kill. And it was following this when Cynthia's entire story changed. Cynthia Alvarez now admitted that her mother Gloria and her stepfather Jose were in fact dead. And she said that her boyfriend Giovanni Gallardo had killed them. Cynthia said that there had obviously been a lot of issues between Giovanni and her parents in the lead up to this case taking place, because as we know, Gloria and Jose did not approve of Giovanni and they did not want their daughter to be with him. I believe I read that Jose and Gloria had even called the police on Giovanni on one occasion. They tried to split the couple up by getting the police involved, so Giovanni was fully aware that his girlfriend's parents did not like him. So there was already that tension and frustration, I suppose, on Giovanni's part towards her parents. But Cynthia said that this took an even bigger turn when she confided in her boyfriend that she had actually been the victim of abuse at the hands of her parents. Cynthia claimed that she had been abused by both her mother and stepfather for a number of years. She said that her mother Gloria was very physically and emotionally abusive. She would constantly shout at Cynthia. She would rarely let her daughter go out and spend time with friends. She would be violent and hit Cynthia. And Cynthia said that her stepfather would do the same. She said that he could also be very violent towards her, but she claimed that Jose wasn't just physically abusive, he had also been sexually abusive. Cynthia said that her stepfather had touched her inappropriately several times over the years, more than 30 times, and she also alleged that he had raped her before. Now, I obviously can't comment on whether or not there is truth in these allegations. I will say that family members have said that they do not believe for 1 minute that these allegations are true. They believe that Cynthia lied about all of this, lied about her mother and stepfather abusing her. And as I understand it, no evidence was found to back up these claims. Some sources seem to suggest that Cynthia may have reported her stepfather's sexual abuse to the authorities at one point, but that her mother Gloria made her drop these allegations and deny the abuse. Well, I'm not really sure what's accurate there. I was able to find some court documents from this case online, and in it stated, quote, Alvarez either failed to report the sexual abuse to authorities, or when she did, she obeyed Vialta's demand that she deny the incidents. So we don't really seem to have a definitive answer as to whether or not these allegations were brought to the police's attention prior to this case taking place. But whether these allegations were true or not, that is what Cynthia told her boyfriend Giovanni. She told him that her parents had been abusing her, and she said that when he heard this, he became became so angry and enraged, so angry in fact, that Giovanni decided that he wanted to kill Jose and Gloria for what they had done to his girlfriend. He wanted to be her knight in shining armor who was going to save her from her evil parents. Cynthia claimed that when Giovanni suggested this plan of killing her parents, she initially said no. However, she kind of indicated that eventually she, I guess, warmed up to the idea. The detectives asked Cynthia in her questioning which of them brought up the concept to kill her parents, to which she responded, Giovanni did. And following this, one of the detectives said, quote, "So then at some point you liked the idea?" And Cynthia responded, quote, "And at the same time I didn't." So she was basically saying that she was very 50-50 about the plan. One minute she agreed with Giovanni and she wanted her parents dead, the next she was hesitant. And so the detectives basically said, well, if you weren't sure, then why didn't you try to stop Giovanni? And Cynthia said that it was because she was scared of him too. Cynthia claimed that in the beginning of her relationship with Giovanni, she was so happy with him. She said that he treated her with kindness and that he showed her the love that she never had from her parents. However, she said that over time, as their relationship continued, Giovanni started to change and she noticed a darker side in her boyfriend. She said that Giovanni himself became abusive towards her. He could be very, very aggressive. She said that Giovanni had hit her before, he'd pulled her hair, he'd put his hands around her neck and choked her. She claimed that he had threatened her with a knife and a gun before, and that he'd even drugged her on one occasion. He made her consume these pills which made her feel weird, and then he raped her and she wasn't able to do anything, tried to stop him because the pills had made her drowsy. So Cynthia said that she feared her boyfriend. She became so terrified of him, and that's why she didn't try to stop him from killing her parents. But Cynthia said that Giovanni first mentioned killing her parents. He first started planning it weeks before it actually happened. And so the detective said to Cynthia, why didn't you do anything to prevent this from happening in those weeks? Why didn't you tell someone or run away from Giovanni? But she just said that she didn't feel like she could run away from him. She was sure that if she ran away, he would find her. So what she was basically saying was that she, in a way, felt forced into going along with the plan to kill her parents. She didn't have much of a choice because of how scared she was of her boyfriend, how much she was under his control. And when the detectives went ahead and questioned Giovanni, he essentially backed up Cynthia's story. He said that it was all him and that Cynthia had nothing to do with what had happened. He said that it was his plan to kill her parents and that he did it alone. He physically carried out the murders on his own, and he did it so that he and Cynthia could be together without her parents getting in the way. But yeah, he basically said that Cynthia was innocent. It was all him. However, the police were not convinced, and they again believed that Cynthia had a bigger part in the killings than she was letting on, and that perhaps the couple had agreed between them before the interviews that Giovanni would just take all the blame for what happened. The police didn't totally believe Cynthia when she said that she just went along with Giovanni's plan because she feared him, and part of the reason for this was because of her behaviour towards Giovanni after they had both been interviewed. So as I said before, initially the couple were separated when they got to the police station. They were interviewed separately, but then afterwards, the detectives made the decision to bring them back together. After their interviews, Giovanni and Cynthia were put in the same room and just left alone because the police were keen to see what they would do, what they would talk about. Now, initially, when Giovanni comes into the room, I believe he sits in a a chair opposite Cynthia. However, Cynthia quickly tells him to get up and come and sit in the chair right next to her. So he does, and they start chatting, and I'll try and include some pictures on the screen, but to me, it just looks like Cynthia is smiling, even maybe laughing at one point. She also leans over to Giovanni and appears to whisper something in his ear, and this all just baffled the police, quite honestly. Cynthia had just told them in her interview about how her boyfriend Giovanni had killed her parents and how she felt powerless to stop it because she was terrified of him. She painted herself out to be a victim in all of this. She placed all of the blame on Giovanni, saying that she was under his control, and yet when she's left alone with him, she doesn't seem scared of him at all. She seems the opposite. She's smiling and whispering in his ear, telling him to move closer to her. Her actions towards him whilst they were in the same room just seemed to almost discredit her story entirely, and it indicated to the police that she hadn't been forced into going along with her parents' murders by Giovanni. She was actually Giovanni's accomplice. I mean, going back to the writings in the notebook, they seem to indicate that she in fact was the leader in all of this. She was the one calling the shots because she essentially ordered him to kill her mother in the notebook. So now let's talk about what actually happened on the day that Jose and Gloria were killed. So it was the evening of the 12th of October 2011, and that night Cynthia claimed that Giovanni turned up to her address and that at the time it was just Cynthia and her mum, Gloria, home. Jose was out and Gloria was busy cooking dinner for Cynthia in the kitchen. She was making some soup, and when Giovanni turned up outside, he had with him a backpack with some items in it. He had a Halloween mask and also a baseball bat. He brought these items because he intended to use them in the murders. According to court documents, Cynthia would later testify that when Giovanni turned up at her home that night, he said that he had come to kill her parents and that initially she claimed that she told him no. However, eventually she just let him in the house anyway, so it seemed as though the plan was going to go ahead. Whether Cynthia actually told him no at first, who knows? Perhaps she was lying about that to again try and deflect the blame onto Giovanni. But anyway, eventually Cynthia let Giovanni into the house with his murder kit, whilst her mother Gloria, I believe, momentarily left the kitchen and went into her bedroom, and Giovanni went to hide. He hid in a storage room with his black Halloween mask on, the mask that would later be found by the police in the home. And when Gloria returned to the kitchen, she couldn't see him. She had no idea that he was there. Now, according to sources, Cynthia was sitting on the couch in the living room slash kitchen area, and she could see Giovanni from this couch whilst he was standing in the storage room. And that is when she began communicating with him via hand gestures. She was using her hands to point to whereabouts her mother was standing in the kitchen, and she was using the notebook. Obviously, she couldn't speak directly to him because otherwise her mum would be able to hear. So whilst Gloria was busy cooking, Cynthia began writing the notes to Giovanni. She wrote them in big letters and she held the notebook up so that he would be able to see. As we know, as we discussed earlier, she wrote things like, "I'm too scared, I cannot do it, and you do it." And those messages to me indicate that perhaps Cynthia was originally supposed to help with actually carrying out the murders, but that she decided she didn't want to in the end. She just wanted Giovanni to do it, and that he did. When the time came for Giovanni to strike, Cynthia claimed that she walked out of the house. She didn't want to be in there to witness what Giovanni was about to do, and so she stepped outside, and then the attack on Gloria began. Giovanni went up behind Gloria as she was in the kitchen and he grabbed her from behind, and he actually held a piece of cloth which he had soaked in rubbing alcohol over her nose and her mouth, as he was hoping that this would subdue Gloria and make her drowsy so that she would be unable to fight back. During the struggle, Giovanni was able to get Gloria down on the ground, and he put his hands around her neck and started to strangle her. And sources state that as he was doing this, Gloria was just shouting her daughter's name, shouting for help. How terrified Gloria must have been in that moment is just beyond comprehension. She was just cooking in her kitchen. She was in the safety of her own home when all of a sudden someone wearing a Halloween mask begins to attack her. She must have been so unbelievably scared, and unfortunately she was unable to really put up much of a fight against her attacker. Giovanni was able to strangle her to death, and when Cynthia walked back into the home, she saw her mum's body lying on the floor. Giovanni covered Gloria's face with a towel. He then tied up her hands and her feet with duct tape, and then the young couple removed some of her jewelry. They took a bracelet off of Gloria's wrist, which they intended to sell later. Sources state that they then dragged Gloria's body into one of the bedrooms. They left her in there, and then they just started waiting for their next target to return home, Jose. Whilst they were waiting, they just chatted to each other. They turned the TV on and started watching TV, which is so creepy to me, that they were just relaxing and watching the television, knowing full well that there was a dead body in the next room. Cynthia's mother's body, of all people too. But yeah, they watched TV for a bit, and then apparently they also started searching around the house for Cynthia's iPod. Her parents had recently confiscated her iPod during an argument, and they hadn't given it back to her, but obviously now that Gloria was dead, she couldn't stop her daughter from taking it back, and so they started looking around the house for it, and eventually Giovanni found it, I think in one of the bedrooms, and he gave it back to his girlfriend. 51-year-old Alvarez-Lara returned to the house at around 9 p.m. that evening, of course completely unaware of what was about to happen when he stepped inside of his home. Giovanni was already ready and waiting. He had his Halloween mask back on, and he was hiding behind the door holding a baseball bat, and I believe Cynthia was lying on the couch in the living room pretending to be asleep. And as soon as Jose walked in, Giovanni attacked. He swung his baseball bat at Jose and hit him with it twice, both times in the face, and Jose fell to the floor. According to sources, Giovanni then proceeded to stomp on Jose a couple of times, and he also momentarily strangled him until Jose lost consciousness. And I think at this point Giovanni and Cynthia assumed that Jose was dead. Giovanni had killed him because they started tying his hands and feet together with tape. But quickly Jose woke up and he started trying to fight for his life and get away from Giovanni. A violent struggle ensued between them, and it was at this point when Giovanni called to his girlfriend Cynthia for help to get Jose under control. And so Cynthia grabbed the baseball bat and she began hitting her stepfather with it. She hit him several times in the lower part of his body. Apparently at one point Jose went to grab a knife, a pocket knife that had fallen out of his pocket and onto the floor during the struggle. So he went to grab it so that he could defend himself, but before he could do so, Cynthia obviously clocked what he was about to do, and so she kicked the knife away from her stepdad. And according to court documents, she then ran to the kitchen, she grabbed another knife, she handed it to her boyfriend, and then he proceeded to stab Jose to death with it. It's believed that Jose was stabbed somewhere in the region of 7 to 11 times. Once Jose was dead, Giovanni tied him up, he wrapped his body in a blanket, and then he put the two bodies into the boot or the trunk of Gloria's car, her Jeep. The couple then got into the vehicle and they started driving around looking for an area where they could bury Jose and Gloria. And eventually they came across a vacant lot in North Long Beach in California, and they decided to bury them there. However, they quickly encountered a problem. As Giovanni started digging into the ground, they realized that this spot wasn't going to be big enough enough for both Jose and Gloria. They were only going to be able to fit one of their bodies in this grave, and so they decided to put Jose's body in there, and they just left Gloria's in the car, and then they just drove back to the house because it was very late. They were probably tired, and so they just decided to deal with what they were going to do with Gloria's body some other time. Upon arriving back at the house, Giovanni began cleaning up the crime scene. He tried to clean up any blood, although he clearly didn't do a very good job, because apparently police and forensic teams did later find blood stains on the floor in the home, and also on the couch and on a mop. But he began trying to clean up anyway, and then the young couple just went to bed. They just went to sleep. The following morning, they actually both went to school, although they didn't attend any of their classes. They skipped class, and when they would later return to the house, they started searching it for other items that they could steal and sell on. They took all of the jewellery out of Gloria's jewellery box, and they removed parts from Jose's truck that they could sell on. I think they sold his vehicle's battery and alternator, and in total they were able to get just under $500 from these items that they had sold. And you may be wondering what they needed this money for, what they spent it on. Well, it turns out that they spent a big chunk of it on Halloween decorations. If you remember, I mentioned earlier on in the video that Cynthia planned to throw a Halloween party on Halloween for her friends from school. And so in the days after the murders, she and Giovanni drove to the store and they shopped for decorations for this party. They brought these flashing lights, these skull lights, they brought glow sticks, they also brought beer and soda and chips for the party. And sickeningly, as they were doing this, as they were shopping for these Halloween decorations, Gloria's body still just lay in the Jeep. Whilst they were in the store, her body was in her car in the parking lot because they still hadn't found a place to bury her yet. Her body stayed in that car for days after her murder. After getting the decorations, the couple began putting them up in the house, which was already just an absolute mess. And then finally, 3 days after the killings, they buried Gloria. They buried her behind an abandoned house in a shallow grave in Norwalk in California, which is just over 8 miles away from Compton where they lived. They then abandoned Gloria's Jeep. They just left it on a nearby street and they chucked the keys to the Jeep over a fence. Cynthia decided to get rid of a load of family photos from the house and her mother's clothing, and then I guess they just continued with their lives. The couple just carried on as normal, and they probably thought that that was it, that they had gotten away with what they had done. They could now live happily as a couple without Jose and Gloria getting in the way. But of course, thankfully, they didn't get away with it, and just a week after the murders, on the 19th of October 2011, that was when the couple were brought into the police station and interviewed, and they finally admitted that Gloria and Jose were dead. And Giovanni directed the detectives to the areas where they disposed of the bodies, and also where they disposed of other items that they had used in the murders. So for example, the baseball bat and also the Jeep. Giovanni showed the police where they abandoned the Jeep. Jose's body was ultimately recovered from the spot that Giovanni had pointed out to them. However, it turns out that Gloria's body had actually already been discovered before the couple were even brought in for their questioning. I believe it was literally on the same day that Gloria was buried behind that abandoned house in Norwalk, on the 15th of October 2011, when a jogger stumbled upon Gloria's remains in the shallow grave and they called the police. And for days, Gloria was actually classed as a Jane Doe. The authorities in Norwalk struggled to identify her because by this point, she had obviously been deceased for a couple of days and her body was fairly decomposed. It wasn't until, again, days later when Cynthia and Giovanni admitted that Jose and Gloria had been murdered, when the connection was made between the Jane Doe case in Norwalk and she was identified as being 58-year-old Gloria Vialta. On the same day that Cynthia and Giovanni were interviewed, they were also arrested, and they were both charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. And it was decided that despite their ages at the time of the killings, despite being only 15 and 16, they would both be tried as adults. Cynthia Alvarez went to trial for her part in the murders in the spring of 2013, and she pleaded not guilty to the charges. She decided to maintain the same story during her trial as the one that she gave in her police interviews, that she had been abused by her mother and stepfather for several years and that she was under her boyfriend Giovanni's control. She claimed that she didn't feel that she could stop him from killing her parents because she had been abused by him too and she was terrified of him. So again, she was trying to place all of the responsibility for the killings onto Giovanni. It was all Giovanni's fault. However, this didn't quite wash with the jury because the evidence put forward by the prosecution proved to them that Cynthia was complicit. The fact that she literally directed Giovanni to kill her mother via the notebook. She wrote, "You do it, and what about if she's going to her bed? Can you kill her?" Those were her words. And also the fact that she assisted Giovanni in Jose's murder. She kicked away the knife which prevented Jose from defending himself, and she hit Jose with the baseball bat. And like we discussed earlier on, Giovanni had been planning these murders for weeks before they happened. He allegedly told Cynthia that he wanted to kill her parents weeks beforehand. So Cynthia had all that time to stop it and tell someone, tell anyone, tell a friend, tell a teacher, tell the police, even tell her own parents, but she didn't. And I mean, her actions after the murders also indicate that she was an accomplice and that she wasn't fazed at all by what had happened to her mum and stepdad, because she literally went shopping for Halloween decorations. Despite what had happened, she still intended to throw that Halloween party. And so at the end of her trial, the jury found Cynthia Alvarez guilty of 2 counts of murder with special circumstances, and she was sentenced to 51 years to life in prison. And at the end of Giovanni Gallardo's court proceedings, he was also found guilty on all counts, and he was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. And so, of course, prison is where Cynthia Alvarez and Giovanni Gallardo still remain to this day. And that is it for this case. That is the solved case of Jose Lara and Gloria Villalta. Literally one of the most insane cases I think I've ever covered. And I can't help but wonder whether Giovanni and Cynthia almost developed this like Romeo and Juliet complex. In their minds, were they these star-crossed lovers that were being kept apart by their parents or Cynthia's parents? And so they decided that in order to be together, they had to eliminate the people that were trying to stop their relationship, Jose and Gloria. I don't know, but let me know your thoughts on the case in the comments. Of course, I really want to know what your opinions are. Do you believe Cynthia's story that she was essentially a victim herself in all of this, or do you agree with the police and the prosecution and ultimately the jury that she willingly went along with the plan to kill her parents and that she even planned it alongside Giovanni? I'm really, really interested to hear your thoughts on that in the comments. But yeah, that is it for this case. Please feel free to let me know of any other cases that you would like to see me cover on this channel in the comments, or alternatively, I do have a case request form linked down below in the description box too. Thank you all so much for watching. Please do give this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you again next week for another mystery with Mollie. Bye!